Welcome to episode 80 of the Creative Train podcast. I'm calling this one That Sketchy Artist, not sketch artists. I'm talking about those ones that give off a vibe of maybe somebody you really don't want to be around or do business with, but people like kind of what they do. I think most people try to keep things between the lines, you know, the way they speak and treat others and the way they engage with employers and clients. But there's a few that make you pause for a moment, kind of squint your eyebrows and what? Did they really just say what I think they said or do what I think they did? And I've been on both sides of this, actually, and by incorrect assumption. I'll tell you about the impetus for this episode coming right up and go into a few stories of my own from my own experience as someone who has suddenly found themselves on the outs. All aboard. I'm not going to go into a long-winded explanation or recite a list of past or present artists who might fall into that category. That's a simple Google search away from you if you're looking for another rabbit hole to dive into. Dear Google, who's a sketchy artist? No, I'm talking about my experience with these people. This is going to be about being an artist in a community, large or small, which sort of forces certain of its population to the outer limits of what we will call hireable, or someone you'd want to work with or not work with. And I'm going to break this down into a few different category examples. Those who have a proven track record of unreliability. Those who have mistreated their fellow artists and creators, like band members or whatever. And those who just can't seem to evolve into a member or leader in a group of their fellows and thus carries this red flag with their name. It's not necessarily needy, but definitely not someone that you can rely on. And now, given the super sensitivities of so many folks, this last type is one who aligns themselves with social or political issues that go against the grain, whatever grain is trending at the moment. The unreliable sort, in my experience, is, it's obvious. The one who shows up late or unprepared, can't read the room or vibe of their audience, and eventually relies on the rest of the group or some other thing to carry the proverbial weight. They are unable to keep the audience's focus. My experience with this type in the music industry comes from someone working with someone who has a reputation for excellence in their field. Someone who is a dynamic singer, player, or someone who has great networking and too often great bullshitting skills. These folks get the big gigs. They have folks calling them to join their band. And they're name droppers. Check out an episode I did called Breaking Up the Band for a deeper dive into that particular habit. Name droppers. But most significantly, they talk a big talk, but rarely follow through with a big show. Promises of big corporate gigs, paid rehearsals, top shelf gear, and of course, the dreaded term exposure by aligning yourself with this person. And I've fallen for this more than a few times than I'd really like to admit. But I have a pretty good sense that if you are an up-and-coming artist or you're new to an area or have demonstrated some exceptional skills, you've drawn the attention of such folks. And these are the folks who bring on the new or perhaps viral acolyte along on their tours or shows, hoping to capture the attention of new ears, eyes, and minds by using the new guy's popularity to pump up their own fading reputation. It's pretty tough when an artist doesn't draw the way they once did. It's an emotional sting and one that can make you feel utterly inadequate and like a shadow made by the light of your former glory. This new person that they hope will pique the interest and generate more ticket sales. This person, the acolyte, must seem absolutely thrilled that this star, air quotes, has chosen them to gig alongside with. What happens is they hire a popular sideman, this acolyte, this viral person, somebody getting on social media a lot. They hire this sideman, so to speak, to draw folks in who might have gotten tired of the same old set list in the same old venues. Now, this is just my experience in the music industry, but I've seen this play out in the visual art scene as well, where a once prominent artist puts on a gallery show with an up-and-comer. And this part is just my own thought. I'm hypothesizing, guessing here. In an attempt to draw folks in to see the popular new stuff, but using their reputation as the catalyst to get the attention of their usual customers who have seemed to lose interest. Does that sound familiar? Have you been there? It's common. It's a survival instinct. We as artists aren't guaranteed anything at all. No regular paycheck, no corporate benefits, and nothing. And as a result, we're often not taken seriously as contributing members to our society because now, after all, artists are non-essential. That was the number one non-essential job to have during the lockdowns. And what did everybody turn to? Entertainment, art, virtual museum tours. But artists aren't important. Just. And I really do feel for these folks. You know, when they see their star fading or whatever, their groove became a rut, and that's all that people expected from them anymore. And so they just stopped going and listening or dining out at their place or going to their gallery shows because it's just the same thing over and over again. My own reaction to being that guy who was no longer the guy to hire is to change my tack and become more of a studio-oriented musician, a voiceover actor, a narrator, and yes, podcaster. I'm still teaching music almost every day, just except Sundays. Yeah. But are any of those, home studio gigs paying the bills? No. But neither was being a gigging musician away from home 2, 3, 4 nights a week. I'd say it's really no different. Actually, as far as my income goes, it's all balanced out. But I have retained my integrity and haven't resorted to the tactics I mentioned just a while ago, trying to bring on somebody else to draw an audience for me. So when I change gears into the artist who has mistreated or deceived their fellows, I could give you a whole bunch of examples, but again, that's just a Google search away from you. But there are 2 in particular that play out all the time and in any type of artistic community. And that is, I hate talking about this, but it's a passionate topic. That's when people associate or align themselves with a charity so that their name becomes synonymous with the charity or any association with benevolent intentions. And they do this in order to further their self-centered goals. And again, this is my experience. You probably have your own if you've been at this for long enough. But my experience was I got a call from a guy eager to have me join his band for a nationwide tour in support of such and such charity. I'm not going to name it. I got the whole story of his experience with them, why he's aligning himself with them, the wonderful inspirational work that he's already done for them, and how he's so eager to keep helping them out because they changed his life. We met for lunch one day before I made any commitment to him, just to talk. I'd never met him before. And he gave me the whole rundown of how the shows and the tour would run. There would be a speech from the local contact person involved with the legitimate charity, a photo shoot with him and this person, and then a show from us, the band. And then more photos with him and the charity folks mixed in with the audience after the show. The exposure would be massive. We'd get more and more gigs. Soon enough, we might even be touring the world. Yeah, right, dude. Funny thing is I had just come off a 1-year stint with another guy who did almost exactly the same thing. He even went as far as hiring someone to pose as his brother and bring him up on the stage and give us this whole story to the audience. And he would start crying in the middle of it, talking about how passionate he was. And it was about 2 months into this 1-year contract that I found out that wasn't his brother. It wasn't. He was just a guy. But with a contract in place, I had to play along, so to speak, until the last date. So I asked this guy back at lunch if he knew this other guy that I just told you about. And he says, oh, yeah, what a great guy, blah, 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 blah. So I told him of my recent experience with him and let him know that I saw right through his scam, and I could see right through the scam being put before me right now. And I wished him a good day and walked away from the table, literally and figuratively. And again, I'm sure that this seems like a good idea at the time, to pull at the heartstrings of a prospective audience, make them think you're the good guy by doing such amazing work for them and endearing an audience member who genuinely wants to support the charity. But really, it was all about getting his name in the spotlight as the benevolent one. He was like Santa Claus showing up at an orphanage on Christmas Day only for a photo op. Yeah, these things are easy to fall for. And for an artist or a musician, really, anyone with a caring bone in their body, you want to help. You do. I know you do. Nobody goes out with malicious intent, on any given day. Maybe they do. I don't know anyone like that. But to do so with such an air of insincerity and lack of genuine motivation, this requires that all of the people you bring on board with you have to be just as disingenuous as yourself. Sometimes people call it out. Sometimes people feel like, I want to do work for the charity, so I'm going to stick with this. But when you associate your name with people like that, and then the news gets around about what this person is actually doing, your name is tarnished. And I'm not going to say don't do charity work. I do it myself whenever I can. If you encounter someone who has attached themselves to a charity to gain notoriety, run. Please run. It never ends up well, and your own reputation, like I said, becomes tarnished as a result of your association with them. So I seem a little bitter, eh? But these are all real things that happen all the time in artistic and creative communities, whether you're in a thriving metropolis or reside in a town of 300 people. There are genuine, honest artists and creators. And then there are those that realize that on some level, they don't really have what it takes to actually become as famous or successful as they think they should be. And they try to surround themselves with those who they think will somehow be able to make this happen for them. So the last point I'm going to get to is the artist who seems to be going against the grain. That grain being what these social media algorithms have determined you should be accepting and supporting of. We're not going to get into any of the topics. Our freedom to express ourselves as artists has been seriously curtailed by these algorithms. And that's not to say that we cannot say the words we want to say, but now increasingly in more countries, there are laws being put in place to determine what we may and what we may not say without legal ramification. That is only free-ish speech. Freedom of speech has not been removed. Neither has freedom of consequence for said speech. But imagine a young Bob Dylan being censored or jailed for speaking out against the capitalist steamroller. No, he's seen as a folk hero, a legend. Or maybe Bob Marley's redemption song being seen as hate speech because he called out the slave trade and brought new ears to the issues of ongoing psychological oppression. No, he's a hero too, as he should be. And don't get me wrong, I love both of the Bob's work. But nowadays, when someone releases a song calling out injustice from the perspective of the little guy, they're called right-wing whack jobs or fascists and all kinds of other stuff. Look at Oliver Anthony. Look what happened to him. You know, if he had done that in the early 60s, he'd be a hero right along there with Bob Dylan. And I felt this particular sting when submitting an audition for a voiceover gig. When the prospective employer saw that I had narrated an audiobook about the Freedom Convoy, which took place in Canada in 2022, they told me they were going to choose a less controversial person to narrate their book. My face wasn't going to appear anywhere. I would be on the Audible credits on Amazon, but it would only be a really big maybe if someone also heard that book, that they would recognize my voice. But I guess they wanted to assume something about me, my character, based on this past association. And the real punchline to me is that this book I auditioned for was for a very pointed and almost indiscriminate dressing down of the role that government plays in our lives, with our money, with our land. And the icing on top of this cake was eventually the person they hired was actually pretty awful. I heard it. And they came back to me with a new offer, which I rejected within about 5 seconds of getting their email. I was the controversial artist. I was the one, the persona non grata. He who had in some capacity or at some point in the past might have done work for someone they maybe have not agreed 100% with. Artistic and creative gigs are precious. They're few and far between. Companies are leaning toward AI voiceovers now, choosing to sound like everyone else instead of having a genuine human read their message. What do we do as voiceover actors? Train the AI? Keep on keeping on? It's a tough call because it seems that real, actual human-made art is becoming unfashionable, and the cartoonish crap with monotone, boring voices, bad grammar, and poorly pronounced words is becoming the thing they think people want. And I'm happy to say that although it may be popular and easy, folks are getting pretty sick of it, especially the teenage set. And this is a massive plus in my mind. There are still out there who love the new toy, the AI toy, and all the easy answers it can give them. But there is a tone to it all. You know, it's weird. No image or sound vibe factor exists in anything like that. People are duped all the time. You know, I saw this one Facebook post about, creative living or whatever it was, and they were showing all these amazing bathroom designs and stuff, and it was clearly AI. Like you could tell there was no disputing, and people were going, "Oh, where can I book the contractor to do this? This is beautiful," and you can tell it's just bots commenting on bot posts. So if you found yourself on the outside for whatever reason, because maybe you chose honesty, integrity, and reliability and realness, well, I congratulate you. Our time might not be right now, but we will always be what real people craving real art will be looking and listening for. So keep on keeping on. We'll get there together. One creative mind to another. There's your pep talk. Now go get to work. You know, I started thinking when I was scripting this episode, I sound kind of bitter. And I'm not normally a bitter guy. I don't carry this baggage around with me, but I have stories to tell. Stories of things that I've lived through, I've worked through, I've persevered through. And I would put those stories to you in that way so that maybe you could recognize the signs before you might get sucked in with something like that. You go into it with the best of intentions. You're honest, you're hardworking, but you end up getting stuck with people who don't really have your best interests aligned with theirs. So what do? Keep on keeping on.